I will shortly ask Willem to deliver the Chair's address to the meeting. This will be followed by the formal items of the meeting, where shareholders will vote by poll on all resolutions. Here I will read out each resolution. For the resolution where the two directors are seeking re-election, they will be given an opportunity to speak when the resolution is put to shareholders. We will show the results of the proxy votes received for that resolution on the screen behind me. At the conclusion of introducing the third and final resolution, and prior to moving to a poll, I will provide an opportunity to ask questions specifically on the resolutions, although we are limited in the time we can devote to these. We will then conduct a poll, and the returning officer for Computershare, Mr. Peter Render, will explain the poll procedure prior to conducting the poll. Please note, as was indicated in the notice of the meeting, where undirected proxies have been given to the Chair will vote these in favour of all resolutions. Once the formal part of the meeting is complete, I will invite one of Australia's leading healthcare analysts, Dr. David Stanton, of the leading investment bank Jefferies Australia, to the microphone. He is assisted today by his colleague, Mr. Archie Pulver. Dr. Stanton will ask the board and key management questions on the business that have been received prior to the meeting. After this, I will take questions from the room. Willem will then conclude the meeting, after which we will be serving light refreshments outside this room in the breakfast area, and please, we welcome you to join us. Willem, would you now please return to the podium to deliver your address to the shareholders? Thank you.
I have a few key points to make before we attend to the business of the meeting. First, I would like to echo the comments I made in the annual report. These are turbulent times, and they are expected to continue some time. CLINUVEL 2022 financial results are excellent and testament to the commitment of the entire CLINUVEL team. We are well positioned to continue to grow the business amidst ongoing global challenges. CLINUVEL's strong position hasn't occurred by mistake. It's due to careful guidance of the company by our Managing Director, Dr. Philip Wolgen. This is why it was critical to retain his service for a further 3 years to the 30th of June 2025, providing stability during this growth phase. Taking into account feedback from a range of stakeholders, we achieved this with a simplified, consistent remuneration package. Alongside the renewal of the CFO employment agreement until the 30th of June 2024, we have the key executive in place to progress the company. Second, I acknowledge CLINUVEL's share price declined over the past year. As a shareholder, it's frustrating to see hard-earned value eroded. Despite the company's ongoing progress and achievements, the fall in the share price from late September 2021 reflects the fall in key global markets. As a profitable company, CLINUVEL is part of a distinct group of biopharmaceuticals. Most companies in our sector are not profitable and are essential milestones, even based firms which are negatively impacted in turbulent markets. Thus, we have been affected by the general downturn in market sentiment, despite a very successful commercial story. Conviction to hold your investments comes from the continued progress of the business and its achievements to date. Thirdly, I wish to review the 2022 financial year. The growth of commercial operations supported again annual profits and we declare, as one of the very few healthcare companies, an annual dividend. We explained our product portfolio, we expanded our product portfolio and made progress across stroke, DNA repair, and vitiligo. The company continued work towards the launch of the first non-pharmaceutical products, particularly by engaging and building new audiences online. Whilst we achieve good results, the pace is not as we would like, and we strive to improve outcomes in the face of global challenges. In summary, the financials and operational outcomes achieved in the financial year 2022 is beyond expectation. I end my remarks today with a thank to all of who have supported us. A special thank to all CLINUVEL employees for their commitment. I wish to thank my board colleagues for their counsel, and on their behalf, I also thank my executive management team for their leadership. Thank you, and I'll now hand back to Sue to conduct the business of the meeting.
Thank you, Willem. The formal items of business, which are listed on the screen behind me. The minutes of the last annual general meeting, along with the notice of meeting, are taken as read. The first agenda item is to table the company's financial statements and the directors' and auditors' report for the year ended 30 June 2022, together with the directors' report and the independent auditors' report as set out in the annual report. No resolution is required, but I now invite shareholders to ask questions relevant to the conduct of the audit and preparation and content of the auditor's report set out in the annual report. We have our lead audit partner, Mr. Michael Cunningham of Grant Thornton Audit, present at the meeting. He can answer any questions that are relevant to the conduct of the audit and the preparation and content of the audit's report. Please limit your questions at this time to matters related to the content of the audit. There will be time for general questions at the conclusion of the meeting. I see no questions being asked, so I now propose to move to Resolution 1. I apologise, I can't see a hand. Do you have a card? Thank you very much. Would you mind stating your name, sir, and your question?
Chris Williams. My question of the auditor first is clarification as to, does he audit the remuneration report?
Yes.
In that case, I see that somewhere around 205,000 shares of the options have been issued to the managing director. It would be very nice if you could detail exactly the performance issues which have led to those being issued in detail.
It's a management question, and we can take that when we take questions from the floor. Thank you very much. In that case, I can't see any further hands, and I apologise that I couldn't see that hand going up. So may I ask you, when it comes to questions, to please raise your hand with a yellow card. Thank you. I will now go to Resolution 1, to consider, and if thought fit, to pass a resolution adopting the remuneration report contained in the annual report sent to all shareholders. It should be noted that this vote by shareholders is an advisory vote only and does not serve to bind the company or its directors. However, the board will consider the outcome of the vote when reviewing the remuneration policies of the company. This resolution requires 50% of votes cast by shareholders to be in favour for it to be passed. However, if 25% or more of votes that are cast are voted against the adoption of the remuneration report at 2 consecutive AGMs, shareholders will be required to vote at the second of the AGMs on a spill resolution, that another meeting to be held within 90 days, at which all the company's directors, other than the managing director, must be represented for the re-election. There is no requirement to allow for a possible spill resolution at this meeting, as the 2021 remuneration report was accepted by greater than 75% of shares voted in the 2021 annual general meeting. The board of directors and key management personnel are not entitled to vote on this resolution. The directors recommend shareholders to vote in favour of this resolution. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are on the screen behind me. As indicated, this resolution will be decided by a poll, which will be conducted following Resolution 3. I now propose to move to the Resolution 2. This next item of business relates to the re-election of Professor Sir Andrew Lickerman as Director, who is retiring by rotation in accordance with Clause 55. I would like to continue with the Resolution 2, which is the re-election of Professor Andrew Lickerman as our Director. I invite Sir Andrew to address the meeting to present why he should be re-elected to the Board of Directors.
Thank you very much, Sue. I'm delighted to put myself forward for your consideration as a non-executive director. I've followed the fortunes of CLINUVEL ever since the current managing director joined the company, and so I've watched its progress with great interest over the years. I won't bore you with a long CV, but my career has included posts in commercial life, in public service, and in academic life. My direct managerial experience includes running a textile plant in Germany, being Chief Financial Officer of the UK's Finance Ministry, the Treasury, and Chief Executive Officer, the Dean of the London Business School. I've been a non-executive director of more than 20 organisations, including the Bank of England and 3 listed companies. I'm currently a full-time member of the London Business School faculty, and my research is on human judgment in making difficult management choices, something I hope I'd be able to bring to the company. An article describing my research appeared in the Harvard Business Review recently, and I've just finished a book which I hope will come out next year. I very much hope that with this background, I'll be able to contribute to CLINUVEL in the next exciting phase of its development.
Thank you, Sir Andrew. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are on the screen. Please cast your votes if you haven't already done so. I move to the next item of this agenda, Resolution 3. This item of business relates to the re-election of Mrs. Brenda Shanahan as Director, who is retiring by rotation in accordance with Clause 57 of the company's constitution and is eligible for re-election as a Director of the company. I invite Mrs. Shanahan to address the meeting to present why she should be re-elected to the Board of Directors.
Good morning to my fellow shareholders. It's nice to be back here again. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you with regard to my re-election as non-executive director, a position I assumed first in 2007. I am committed to performing the duties of director to support the success of CLINUVEL and its products. In my broader portfolio for business, I continue to focus heavily on getting outcomes in health innovation, commercialisation and delivery of such. My personal ambition is to see through this great Australian success story to multiple revenue streams, which is well underway, and we'll hear a lot more about that today. Hence my appetite to be involved in my final term as one of the 2 compulsory directors on the board. I look forward to your support and thank you for your consideration. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are on the screen. Please cast your votes if you haven't already done so. We have now covered all items of business, so I will now facilitate questions on resolutions. An opportunity to ask general questions on the business will be given at the end of this meeting. As a reminder, only members of the company holding coloured cards are eligible to vote, and we ask that you wait for the microphone and introduce yourself before asking a question. Please limit your questions at this time to matters related to the 3 resolutions only. I ask shareholders who may have more than 1 question or comment to initially ask 1 question only and allow others to ask questions before you ask further questions. May I now ask for questions, please? On any of the 3 resolutions. If you would care again to hold your card up, sir, and state your name so that people, particularly on our webcast, know who is asking questions.
It's just going to be me today. It's the same card.
Thank you.
It's the same person, Chris Williams. First question's in relation to the Remuneration Committee report. Did the board perform an executive search before renewing the CEO and CFO's contracts in the past year? If not, why not? And can we therefore believe that good governance principles are served without understanding what other professional skill sets may be on offer to us?
Thank you for your question. I will direct that question, if I may, to our chair, Mr. Blydorp.
I'm following the CLINUVEL story also from the beginning of the start with Mr. Volgan. One time he called me and he said, I'm in Australia and I'm meeting up with a quite interesting company, and they offered me a role as a CEO. He said, Australia is a little far away, but on the other hand, could be of interest. And I think the entrepreneurial side of the CEO made CLINUVEL what is it today. So we hope, and we have tried hard, that he stayed in his role as a CEO. Similar experience I have with the CFO. Those guys made CLINUVEL what it is today, and we don't see any reason to have an alternative. So that's mainly our approach to the executives. We are happy they are on board. We have other discussions, of course, with them, how long they will do it in the future, and we will start looking now already if we have talents within the company who could take over their possible retirements. So that's, I think, the vision of the board and my personal vision also. Because I think every company needs entrepreneurship. It's not only a role as CEO, it's more than that. It's the entrepreneurial side which makes the company successful. And that's what we have seen in the past, and hopefully in the future, what Mr. Philip Volgan is bringing to the company. So my personal opinion is, I hope for CLINUVEL that he will be there for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He's still young, so he could do it. This week we were making jokes. and about that he tries to keep us on the board, but I told him that is a nice suggestion, but we will try to keep you on the board in your role as a CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Blydorp. May I ask if there are any further questions on any of the 3 resolutions? I see a hand again. Mr. Wilson, you have a separate question.
I take it that was a no. Yeah, I asked a question earlier on in relation to the 205,000 options which are now issued to the Managing Director. I've done some maths and I couldn't get to the number of rights which had been issued against the targets which have been set in the performance criteria. I would like some detail, please, on exactly which ones have been issued.
Thank you for your question. That is a very detailed question, and if I may, I would like to ask you to ask the question following this meeting when it can be discussed with you in more detail. Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you've had 2 questions now. I think maybe one more because we are limited on time as you're asking for another question.
I don't believe it's just me who would like to know what that detail is. So unless you're going to hold a forum where everybody can attend, then I don't believe that we're doing justice. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. We will take them. We will note them. I see a further question. Sir, could I have your name, please?
Mark Badcock.
Thank you.
Letter to Ms Shanahan. Just as in the interest of best corporate governance, do you think that an independent non-executive director has a time period where they should rotate?
Thank you for your question. May I refer that question to Mrs Shanahan?
Under the Corporations Act, as you know, each non-executive director has to stand for re-election every 3 years, and that's my term for that last 3 years has been completed today. I have been asked by the board to put my candidacy forward, which I'm very happy to do, and I will be even happier if the shareholders elect to appoint me to the position for another term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Shanahan. Thank you. I think in the interest of time, I would like to progress the meeting. I don't see any other hands. Thank you for that comment, but I can't see a hand going up and I can't see a yellow card. I think, Mr Wilson, you've had the floor for quite a long time. Unless it's an extremely pertinent question, I would like to move on. I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you, and I am going to move on. In light of time, we will now begin the poll process on the resolutions. I now appoint Mr Peter Render of Computershare as Returning Officer and call upon him to instruct the meeting on the poll process and procedure and to conduct the poll. Peter, could you please address the meeting with regard to the poll process and procedure? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now go through the process for completing your poll cards. Shareholders entitled to vote on these resolutions have blue poll cards. On the reverse of the blue card are the voting items. Please mark each item on how you'd like to cast your votes. We'll bring round poll boxes. Please ensure you lodge your cards in the poll boxes to have your vote counted. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. The box is now going around the room. I now consider the poll closed. I'm now going to ask Dr. David Stanton to the stage, along with the directors and our CFO and Company Secretary, Darren Keamy. Dr. David Stanton is one of Australia's leading healthcare analysts from investment bank Jefferies, who will facilitate thematic questions on notice to the meeting and board from shareholders. David has followed CLINUVEL since its clinical phase and has deep knowledge of our programs and approach, making him well placed to facilitate a discussion. We have chosen this novel approach to provide access to the broader board after 2 years of virtual interactions. I should note that Dr. Stanton is independent in his role and has agreed to assume this responsibility as part of his broader role in the market. At the end of this session, I will facilitate questions from the floor before concluding the meeting, and now I am going to take my seat and hand over to David.
Thank you very much, Sue, for that. Just to introduce myself, my name is David Stanton. I'm a stockbroking analyst and I work for Jefferies Australia. As Sue says, my team independently covers CLINUVEL and issues research on the company. And as Sue says, I've been asked to facilitate online previously submitted questions from shareholders to the board and to management. First question that I've got here in terms of succession planning. The board has extended Dr. Wolgen's employment contract until the 30th of June 2025. What plans are in place regarding succession planning, please?
Thank you, David. We have had part of the answer to this question already through a question from the floor, but I will pass over to our chairman, Mr. Blydorp, for any further comments on this.
The CEO remuneration has been constant the last 2 years. No pay rises have been given. CLINUVEL extended the CEO employment agreement for 3 years, and I was quite happy with it. His fixed base remuneration has not been increased. And Philip agreed with the unusual process to keep this fixed salary constant to benefit the company. Unlike any other company, we do not award the CEO shares or option each year, but every 4 years. From performance rights issued 3 years ago by the shareholders, only 16% have been achieved. Therefore, questions on high magnitude of the equity value are totally inappropriate and not well informed. This maybe clears up our balance sheet and payout of 10 years of accumulated annual leave, long service leave, which has been unused since Philip has not been able to take longer holidays due to the workload. This accumulated annual leave paid out is seen as a higher remuneration for this year, but going forward, all leave obligations have been cleared from CLINUVEL's books now. So in conclusion, the CEO salary is not higher at all. As a matter of fact, the board has reduced all incentives from Philip's employment agreement, no further business generating incentives, no long-term incentives such as loyalty awards, no annual shares or options. Next year, as the performance plan comes to an end of its vesting, the board will address Philip's equity position in the company. I hope this will make a clear picture for you. So there were some old commitments we have to deal with, but I think we find a correct solution, and it's a matter of how the accountant wants to have it translated in the books. But I think the books are clean now. There are no old commitments, and we are working on the next phase quite clean and straightforward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question, as previously submitted question, can the company explain the changes in the share price since September 2021, please?
Thank you again, David. This is a question which I think would be relevant for me to ask Sir Andrew Lickerman to respond to, please.
Yes, happy to do that. Well, look, all of us would love to know why share prices go up and down. There are many people who speculate about this in every context. Is this microphone on, by the way? Is it? Okay, fine. As you know, the share price hit a high in September 2021, having moved up by 50% over the previous month. Now, one question, therefore, is why did the share price move so quickly at that time, and was the fall thereafter in some way a reversal of whatever it is pushed it up then, some particular speculative move at that stage, some technical move, whatever it was. So one explanation, I think, is it was a reversal of a particular rise at a particular time. A second reason, perhaps, is that the stock markets more generally around the world, and pharmaceuticals in particular, have had a decline in that period. And CLINUVEL has been very much part of that. So you could say that the company's stock price reflected a more general trend, both in the market and for the sector. There's a third reason, perhaps, that CLINUVEL is part of a sector which is difficult to value, and where, if one looks at earnings and cash flows into the future, it's a great deal more uncertain than many other sectors. So it is quite likely that as a stock, it will be more volatile on average than the stock market as a whole. So those are three possible reasons why. I should emphasize this is a personal view. There is no company view about why the company's stock goes up and down. I mean, I could go on for hours about this. You will be relieved to know I won't be.
Thank you very much. I guess another question in regards to this is, can the company comment on other influences and their ongoing impact on the company's share price, please?
Thank you, David. We're now in the financial arena. I'd like to direct that question to Darren, our CFO, please.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Sue. Other influences affecting the share price is certainly we've seen an increase in short selling in the past two years. Now, short selling has affected our share price. We've seen since we entered the ASX 200 around 2 years ago an increase in the shorts. It saw about 9% of our issued capital be shorted. That saw us briefly in the top 10. That has declined, although it has increased back to 6%. So I think we're sitting around the top 30. Shorting is not illegal, but it's certainly something that we do not like. We think it's anathema to what we are trying to do, and that is to promote shareholder wealth. And I hope many, if not all of you in the room, would also agree. We think there are some rumours and misinformation that short sellers have promoted and encouraged out there that has driven and with the intent to reduce the share price. But all we can say is that as a board and as management, we're trying to do our best to combat that by simply performing as well as we can. That involves maintaining consistent communication flow, being very transparent about our financial results, providing information that is above minimum requirements. That includes continuing our quarterly cash flow results. That's something that we're not obligated to do anymore. And also maintain regular news flow through news communiques, through regular strategic updates.
Thank you. And if we move on to the addressable market, we've seen revenues from EPP and treating EPP patients increasing over the past few years. At some stage, though, it's likely to plateau as you reach a point where you're treating a very high percentage of those patients in markets in which you operate. Can you provide any insights into when that might occur, please?
Thank you, David. Well, we're now moving into some clinical areas, and I think it's appropriate to ask our CEO, Dr. Philip Morgan, to speak to that.
Thank you, first of all, for attending, Dr. Dave Stanton. This is a very unusual format, but we experiment and appreciate your attendance. It's a question that has been raised frequently. Where is the plateau in terms of available patient populations in Europe and in the US? And as you used from us, we are not advocating publicly the percentage of patients we treat in the world. But I'm confident to say that we have just started. In economic terms, if we look at a frontier, a curve of optimum use of patient communities and serving them, we are well below that curve. I would go as far as to say, in our analysis, the market of EPP patients worldwide is sufficiently large to bear a number of actors, pharmaceutical companies, that can serve these patients. And so both in Europe and in the US, we see a double-digit growth, and there's no reason to believe that that will cease.
Thank you very much. And I guess as a follow-up to that, you've mentioned Europe and the US. When will you look to treat or be able to treat EPP patients in Australia, please?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question. I cannot expect that all of you have followed the company closely. The eternal tragedy that I see in pharmaceutical drug development is unexpectedly not a case of getting a rejection from the major regulatory authorities in the world, FDA and EMA. No, the real tragedy is actually getting approval, but seeing that a novel, innovative treatment is not getting the reimbursement that one thinks it deserves. And for that you need deep analysis of which countries are most prone to reimburse these treatments. Now for a patient, it is unspeakable to understand that there is probably a treatment out there, but he or she will not be able to access the treatment since the reimbursement agencies or insurances in the world are unwilling to pay for it. And what I try to state in public is that the ultimate triage, or where novel treatments land, are not conducted by the physicians, the prescribers, but by the insurance companies. And so we have designed a strategy in Europe and in the US by actually directly communicating with insurers. That is an unusual strategy for a pharmaceutical company. And in that light, we understood the position of the PBAC, which is the advisory committee that presides over drug prices in Australia. And the PBAC is prone to look at reference countries in the world. Which countries in the world have actually agreed to reimbursement of the treatment? And some of these reference countries are indeed in Europe. And so I will summarize by stating that in January 2022, earlier this year, we obtained reimbursement from Germany, one of the reference countries, which influences Australia. And therefore, there's a logical sequence of understanding that you need to complete successfully the negotiations with Germany prior to engaging with the PBAC. So the answer is it's coming.
Thank you. And if we move on to communications, another online question. You know, the company does put things out to the market in terms of, you know, updates and outcomes, but occasionally sometimes when these aren't achieved, the company has not advised the markets. why not, and how does the board view this going forward, please?
Thank you, David. Well, communications sits in my portfolio, so I would like to take this question, please. There is a balance to be made about under-reporting and under or over-reporting, and the ASX is quite keen that biopharmas in particular do not fall into the trap of over-reporting. And we're certainly not falling into that trap, but we do give lots of regular updates. And I think in terms, if you look across the sector, we give more updates than many more companies. We like to keep our shareholders informed, and we have many ways of doing that very successfully. But it isn't appropriate to list every single up and down as it happens in the daily life of the running of a company. We would rather give you information on those things that matter, and we believe that that is actually what we do. The board is very conscious of the importance of communication, and it's an area that we visit regularly.
Thank you. And if we move on to clinical programs, what factors could potentially impact the progress of CLINUVEL's clinical programs, please?
Well, that's, I think, again, an area that is the remit of our CEO. So again, Philippe, I would ask you to address that question.
Which factors could impact the progress?
The progress of clinical programs, please.
You can make a division between internal and external factors. For sake of time, I will remain by discussing the external factors. We pride ourselves to innovate, and that's a loaded term that needs explanation. Innovation is not only introducing novel technology to a market, novel medical technology. Innovation actually occurs on multiple fronts. Every company has a modus operandi and emphases, particular points of attention. And our particular point of attention is that successful innovative technology per se is not sufficient to achieve commercial success. And I emphasize that word commercial success for the reasons I just stated before in the answer. We work backwards. It is not sufficient to have a scientific dream that may last 2 decades, but actually to have a real sense early on in a development program whether you can successfully commercialize a product in various continents. Now, having said that, for that, our emphasis is on the environment. Is the environment conditioned to embrace new technology? And what is the environment? Regulatory authorities, ethics committees, prescribing doctors. If any of these actors is not ready to embrace or to accept novel technology, you're on course to fail. And so there are a number of external factors that we need to get right. And that requires discussion, I would say cogent arguments with all these 3 actors in order for them to accept that, for instance, new melanocortins are going to be prescribed or coming to market. And sometimes that takes time. But we believe that safety of technology is the compelling argument for those actors to accept, and therefore for us to mitigate these external factors.
Thank you very much. So if we move on to specific clinical programs and we start with DNA repair, what's the current status of the DNA repair program, please?
Philippe, I think that's another one for you, please.
Well, DNA repair is a topic particularly close to my passion in this company. Once one possesses technology, and as you know, the history of this company is fascinating. It originated 42 years ago. The art and the skill is actually to dissect technology and have a team around it that is keen to do so over a decade or more, and look at the attributes, the characteristics, in other words, where that technology can be deployed. And to summarize, in the melanocortin space, we discovered that it's anti-oncotic, it reduces swelling, it indeed induces a bronze, it's melanogenic, it's antioxidative, but most of all, it works on the nucleus of a cell. It does something to single-strand DNA that is damaged by UV, and that's a fascinating topic that can be enhanced, that can be used in its right way, and then commercialized. And for that we have a dual strategy. And we identified really early on in the program a group of patients worldwide that no other company wanted to address. And these are eczeroderma pigmentosum patients. They have a lifespan of 30 years. It's quite a tragic existence. No matter how small the population is, they're dispersed around the world. And they are particularly susceptible to incur skin cancers. They develop skin cancers, multiple during a year. Now, as management, you can look at it two ways. You've got technology that possibly could work in that group of patients, and you could walk away and say, well, the market is small, it's not worthwhile, let's behave like any other company. Or you could say, well, there is a reasonable chance actually to make it to the finishing line and commercializing that product in the same manner as we looked at EPP, where no other company ever had been interested in EPP. And by dissecting and using the technology in the right manner, you then therefore also innovating in the way you design protocols, the way you design new assays, the way you work with physicians and centers. And when that all converges to one point, the chance of success, or in other words, mitigating the risk of doing something new or the first time, is acceptable. And that's really where we are. And what you see on that slide, you see the program divided in 5 trials, and most of them are run in parallel. That gives us, and you as shareholders, the highest probability of actually seeing this drug now translated in the second indication, XP. The dialogues with regulatory authorities are being conducted in parallel, and that gives us the confidence that we're on the right track.
And as a follow-up to that, please, therefore, how long will it take, do you believe, to get approvals in XP, please?
Well, as a company, you make it your business to talk to the analyst at least once a quarter and feed them information. And so you put me on the spot again. David, we are not a company that gives precise timelines because you can't keep them. There are too many factors along the road that are reasons for delays, rework, rethink. But I've put a timeline to myself, and that is by the end of my tenure, which is expiring in June 25. I very much would like to see XP and vitiligo come to market.
Understood. Thank you. And in terms, if we move to stroke, you know, what are the next steps in the stroke program, please?
David, I think it's time to give another of our board members, and we're lucky to have other clinicians on our board, so I'd like to direct that question on stroke, please, to Professor Rosenfeld.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, David. The F-melanotide drug, the melanocortin, is a very strong neuroprotective agent. It helps preserve nerve cells that have lost their oxygen and blood supply. And so we thought it would be a good candidate to try in stroke. Now, there are a significant group of stroke patients that are not suitable for standard treatments, the clot dissolution, the clot retrieval, and there are no other drugs available for stroke. This would be the first one if it proves successful. So we did the first trial, 801, at the Alfred Hospital here in Melbourne, where we had 6 patients. It was a safety trial. The drug proved to be very safe. And we also noted that there was neurological improvement in these patients. One died, but that wasn't due to the drug. It was due to the seriousness of the illness. So we were encouraged by that, and we now plan to do our second stroke trial, which will be conducted in Europe, to start very shortly, where there will be an increased number of patients. The dose of the drug will be increased and the frequency of the drug will be increased. And we'll again be looking largely at safety, but we'll also be looking at neurological improvements as well. So this will be an important study along the way to really showing that this drug has a role in stroke patients. We haven't shown that yet, but that's what we're aiming to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we move to vitiligo, how do shareholders, or how should shareholders interpret potentially SCENESSE being a monotherapy in vitiligo, please?
I'm going to take the vitiligo question back to Philippe, please.
Again, let's not presume things. There may be new shareholders in the room. Vitiligo is a depigmentation or a disorder where patients rapidly lose their skin color. It's a very visible disorder in those populations of darker skin complexion, like my complexion of Mediterranean background. You would see vitiligo quite stark. And we conducted 2 trials early on in this program, in 2012 and 14, in patients of darker skin color. And to our surprise, after 6 injections of afamelanotide, we saw 80 to 90% repigmentation reoccurring. And that was with using what is standard in European and North American centers called narrowband UVB, which is really a cabin emitting wavelengths of 308 nanometers. Now that standard of care, narrowband UVB, is used worldwide every minute of the day, also here in Melbourne. It's not very effective. And the paradox is that narrowband UVB has never been approved by the main gatekeepers, EMA and FDA, for vitiligo. Yet, the overwhelming majority of physicians in the world, dermatologists, have this narrowband UVB cabin for psoriasis. And they also using it for vitiligo because there is no other remedy, there's no other therapy. And it is owing to our team and Dr. Dennis Wright, our CSO, who unraveled the mystery of using narrowband UVB because it induces, it awakens baby cells, stem cells, next to the hair follicle. And what we did is we combined our drug once these baby cells were awakened to make the treatment very effective. And the results were astounding. I say that objectively because unlike any other disease, by using the drug, deploying the drug, you see actually the effect within 48 hours when the color starts coming back. So here we have a conundrum. We have a drug in combination that works, but the device has never been approved for its use by FDA and EMA, and we needed to discuss that for a number of years with them because the perception of the FDA is that we will not we as regulators will not approve a treatment for which use we have not rubber stamped it. The breakthrough came in March 2021 after persistent requests from our part to the FDA to conduct a patient's meeting. And that took place in Silver Spring in March 21. And no surprise, 80% of the attendants were patients of color. Now, it is good as a company to win on all fronts, on the financial front, on the operational front, also on the clinical front. And perhaps I should start with that part. And no other company cared for patients of color, and we wanted to make that our social mandate. So what happened during that meeting is there was a conversion by the regulatory authorities who actually acknowledged for the first time in public that these patients needed treatment. So this is an example where you as a company could actually continue the spending on the program without any hope of getting regulatory authorities. That's north of a figure of 200 million. Knowing that your treatment could be effective, but where the gatekeeper already says, we will not accept it. Well, we will give you false hope in the process. But as the regulators converged to a point where say, we now understand the point, meaning regulators evolve in their opinion, we are now aligned in our objectives, and I dare to say that is one of the most exciting parts of the company, to have a drug where you see a visual change and that works systemically. That's also a very important point, because sometimes it's good to be number two, not to be number one. And we saw in July 2022, by the same division of the FDA, actually approving a drug for the first time in this disease by a company called Incyte, who has a topical immune modulator that you need to put on your skin every so often and hope that the color keeps coming back. And our alternative, and I believe objectively that is a superior alternative, is to have a systemic treatment, an injection that lasts for a number of weeks, where the color comes gradually back. So, as you see on this slide, we have a parallel program where we use the drug as a monotherapy without a narrowband UVB, and the comparator, a combination therapy. And again, in order to preempt the questions, the timelines, very much before I stepped down of this stage in 2025.
Thank you very much. And finally, to change topics, a new indication. You've mentioned a new indication, or the company's mentioned a new indication for a number of years. Can you give us an update on that, please?
Philippe, you again, please.
The ubiquitous use of technology that has so much potency is not simple. You can make costly errors, and I think as you used from us, there is a real financial discipline in understanding of how to navigate a company through various depressions, recessions, downturns. There's never a moment to be content or satisfied about it, but if I pause for a second, we haven't done badly to protect shareholders from an excessive dilution over 17 years. And my intent with Mr. Keamy and his finance team is to continue that conduct. And when you choose and identify new indications, again, working backwards, is it possible that you will find reimbursement agencies throughout the world, predominantly in the major markets, to reimburse that novel technology for this particular indication? again, following the trail, how will prescribers react to it? What is the intellectual position, the property position of the company? Do you have a position that's robust enough to withstand competitors along the way? And last but not least, are there any safety or ethics concerns? I dare to say from all these factors, we've satisfied all but one. That hinges on the IP. And once that box is ticked, we will announce that sixth indication. If you make an error, you commit an error on all these factors that I mentioned, you expose the company and actually the success is halved, is compromised. And so we believe that in the course of 2023, you'll have a new indication to write about with your team.
Thank you. And a question online, or previously submitted. When do you expect competition in EPP treatment, and what do you believe the impact will be, please?
Back to you, Philippe, I think.
I dislike monologues on this front.
I'll give you a break in a minute.
The question of competition has come up time and time again, not the least because analysts write about it. I've tried to answer where we see CLINUVEL and in its technology on the curve. It's a possibility frontier where you look at the market as a whole, as it is now, and the market growth. And we've seen over the last 6 years a double-digit growth in registered patients, both in Europe and in the US. When I emphasize the word registered patients, it implies that the company, therefore, also manages registries of patients in Europe and in the US. It's quite important to realize because there's a real value in disintermediating third parties. And one of the benefits, the value, is that you find and retain top and talented management to directly speak to hospitals, patients, insurance companies like we have in Europe and in the US. And with that, you build a repository of data and patients. One of the key words that we have in our company is longitude. That is the lengthy, longitudinal management of all our stakeholders, the suppliers, the analysts, the hospitals. And if you prolong that over a decade, value will arise, and the same with patients. And so we see in our registries double-digit growth of new patients, patients that were never diagnosed before, and that register with us for the optionality to have treatment. And then we redirect these patients to the hospitals that we have trained and accredited. So again, the competition will always be there. There's no illusion that the company will retain a monopoly. But the systems are in place, there's a market to grow, and there's absolutely room for multiple actors.
Thank you. And if we move on to China, a question on that country, please. Please update us on your progress in China.
Thank you. Well, we will give Philippe a break. I think it's time now to go back to Professor Rosenfeld, please, to talk to us on China.
Thank you, Sue and David. We, the board and the company, are very keen to grow a business in China and sell our products in China. And you're asking why we haven't achieved that as yet. And there are 3 reasons for that, for the slowdown in progress. The first is, of course, COVID. I mean, China is largely locked down with COVID. We've been locked down, and business interchange has been challenging, to say the least. The second reason is that the business if you like, permission to work in China has been very challenging for Australia in the last year or two because of the restrictions that China has placed on Australian business interchange. The third reason is that, and we hope that will improve, by the way, the third reason is that the regulatory environment in China is I would say, significantly more challenging than other jurisdictions, and also their insurance arrangements are very complex and difficult to navigate, and so these are other reasons. But we hope over time that these three factors will improve, and that we will be able to sell our product in China, because there is quite a large potential market there. Thank you.
Thank you. On your IP, please. Companies talk about economic moats and the like. How does CLINUVEL navigate that, and does it its economic moat, and how does it remain protected in terms of its economic moat, please?
I think that's a question I would like to feed back to you, Philip, please, on IP.
Intellectual property of a pharmaceutical company requires a lot of attention. I can't give you a lecture on intellectual property because I would be sitting here all afternoon, but it's a fascinating, dynamic process where you try to address the key markets and anticipate where a company will be active in distributing its drug. We do that through the EPO, the European Patent Office, and the PCT system in the US. You seek freedom to operate. That's basically what our teams are doing and our patent lawyers. And patents come in different shapes and forms. In our case, pharmacogenomic patents, where you look at a cellular response to certain technologies. You look at Swiss method patents, method of use, where do you intend to use it. You file these patents periodically, almost on a quarterly basis, and you look for the searches, prior art, and see what comes close to the moats that you try to defend. And so it's a dynamic process where you look at not only the life cycle management of technology, of how you can improve your technology, but also how you improve your claims of a patent. And that is exceedingly important because that is actually a negotiation between the examining officers in each jurisdiction and the company that needs to take a position on how and where it deploys its technology. The patent portfolio, the market exclusivity, the complexity of technology, those three factors are generally or have proven sufficient for us to keep our position with this, I would say, novel implant. And so in general, we are always concerned about other actors, but reasonably confident that we've kept those at bay. So active management, understanding how you develop it, and being quite pedantic on your claims. And that's a give and take with each jurisdiction.
Thank you. And if we change directions, you have an ADR. On behalf of the ADR holders, why can't they vote on resolutions of the meetings of the company, please?
Thank you, David. I think this is an area that is best served by directing the questions to our Company Secretary, Darren Keamy. Please.
Thank you, Sue. Now, ADRs are American Depository Receipts. Without going into the complexities of it, they basically give the US retail investor the opportunity to invest in Australian companies. It's a non-tradable security These securities are simply not identifiable on our share register, so we cannot accept votes that are attached to the ADR holders. And one of the the ADR holder has the ability to vote. Nevertheless, there are options available to an ADR holder. They can cancel the ADR and have them reissued as an ordinary share, and therefore they will appear on our share register and their votes can be submitted. If an ADR holder wants to do that, they just can approach their local broker in the US. They can also make contact with the custodian that if it's a non-sponsored ADR or if it's a sponsored ADR, they can approach the sponsoring bank that runs the program for CLINUVEL, the Bank of New York Mellon, who can endeavour to assist them on a best endeavours basis. It's important to note that this is not unusual where there are dozens of Australian companies with an ADR program. For reasons of cost and regulatory complexity, we generally don't disseminate proxy notices, but nevertheless there are options available for ADR holders should they wish to vote.
Thank you. And then there's a follow-up. Why can't ADR holders attend meetings of the company, please?
Well, once again, an ADR holder is not identifiable on our share register. This is a shareholder meeting, a private meeting, and that also applies with shareholders who hold their shares through custodians. But nevertheless, this year we are providing greater access to this AGM through the webcast, and we hope that that certainly provides greater access for ADR holders to observe and participate.
Thank you. And if we move on to a different topic, drug development, can you tell us a little bit more about the commercialisation of Neuracthal, its purpose, and including why is the company working to get this product onto market, given that it's already used by other companies? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. While divulging in the product timelines of any CLINUVEL product is not standard practice, I can say that Neuracthal, which is adrenocorticotropin hormone, is short-term, i.e. less than 3 years. Why is this molecule important? Or there's two aspects to this question. One is the molecule itself. Adrenocorticotropin hormone is an important antioxidant agent. I'll say more about that in a second. But CLINUVEL did substantial research in this area, and what they found was there was an unmet need. The unmet need had to do with the lack of a long-acting product. And so CLINUVEL has come up with a novel solution to that, and that is to provide the market with a long-acting ACTH product. In doing so, we will add something to the ACTH market where there has been little or no innovation in a long time. Having said that, why is ACTH an important molecule? First of all, it has potent anti-inflammatory properties as well as antioxidant properties, and so it will affect patients positively in hopefully preventing deaths from neurodegenerative as well as neurological diseases. Two of these include infantile spasm and relapsing multiple sclerosis. And so I look forward to the entrance of Neuracthal into this market because of the new novel delivery system. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And if we move to regulatory, which is always important, can you give us an update as to regulatory operations, and have the regulatory authorities ever refused to approve any CLINUVEL drugs or products? And if so, what was the eventual outcome, please?
Thank you. Well, we've had some referral already to regulatory approval, but I think that's an appropriate question to direct to Philippe, the CEO, please.
Yeah, that's a bizarre question, but I've heard it before. A regulatory refusal is not a laughing matter. It's actually a disclosable event that causes many of the life science stocks to lose immense value on its announcement. And we've chosen a European route first before we went to US. And we formed with what I believe is one of the better regulatory teams in this country. And there's no shame in saying that it was a long, hard-fought battle with the European Medicines Agency that needed to overcome the reservation of allowing a first melanocortin to market. But we did it on merits and arguments, the strength of our arguments, and obtained approval in the first pass in October 2014. We had chosen this sequence before going to the US, because the US regulatory agencies were well aware of afamelanotide, because it had been invented and developed 2 decades prior, or 3 decades prior. And it was our turn as newly installed management to take it to market. And we did it again in first pass. So I understand that there are a number of members of this company that disseminated false information about a complete response. But the complete response is 2 words that are exquisitely expensive in a pharmaceutical company, because it sets you back 5 years. So under the guidance of Dr. Dennis Wright, no, this company has never had a rejection or complete response. But I'm glad you mentioned this.
Thank you. In terms of a general strategy, we've seen CLINUVEL start to vertically integrate all product development and delivery activities. You know, can you give us an update as to whether CLINUVEL intends to continue with this approach, please?
Thank you, David. Well, I'm going to take that question, if I may. CLINUVEL has adopted what to many seems quite a novel way of operating, but it has been successful. And at this moment in time, there seems no reason why we would change it. If you vertically integrate your operations, it has a number of benefits, and particularly retention of talent. So, in this day and age where talent is so difficult to find, what we cannot afford to do is to lose our good people. And we give them a lot of control over how they work, and they work as teams in every aspect of the delivery of services. And of course, as we develop new products, we need to review and to see whether or not this system is still working to its best optimum output. And for example, we created a communications, branding and marketing team which draws together all aspects of the company. And as a regular item, a standing item at our meetings, is to look to see if the way that the business is developing operationally remains the best way to optimize cost control, retention of staff, and safety and security in the delivery of our products.
Thank you. And I've got a question. How does the board view the future of the company, please?
Let's change tack with our questions. May I ask Sir Andrew to take that question, please?
Okay, so you've heard in detail about the very impressive set of potential products in the pipeline. And clearly, the company is highly focused on trying to make sure it gets those to market, to do so in a way that is profitable for the company, in a way that is feasible for the company. So the main focus of attention, inevitably, is on that very substantial pipeline of products. But the company doesn't exclude the possibility of going outside through inorganic growth, potentially looking at acquisition targets, if they're compatible with what the company is doing now and if it feels it can deliver on that, because we know inorganic growth is risky in many ways, and so it depends, I think, on the resources which the company is able to deploy to make any inorganic growth successful. So the focus will continue to be undoubtedly on what we have in hand, but we are in a position to look also at the possibilities outside.
Thank you. And if we move to Dermato Cosmetics, can we have an update of the progress and potential release of the over-the-counter products to target markets, please?
Thank you very much. Well, going on to this new product line, I would like to ask Philippe to answer that question, if I may.
I think I owe you a bit of a background on this question. A pharmaceutical company with, at its core, the development of novel hormones would be perceived as exotic in venturing out into specialized consumer markets. So then we would ask, well, why are you doing that? Are you heaping risk on already a risky venture? And the answer is, again, by investigating, dissecting technology, we understood the potential of formulating hormones for patients among a general population at special need. And so the opportunity opens up at various fronts. The first opportunity opened up by identifying 3 groups that had not been addressed. The first group are those patients that have had a prior history of skin cancer or the first line of family members of skin cancer of a higher risk. The second group are those that are lifelong immune compromised or suppressed. And you'll be surprised how many of those have a regimen of drugs that they need to stay on lifelong, for instance, organ transplant patients. And the third group are those that are exposed chronically, long-term, years, to outdoors conditions, farmers, construction workers, professional sporters. And these 3 groups in aggregate are groups that the dermato-cosmetic industry are not very keen to communicate with because it doesn't fit their business model. It's not cosmetics, it's not beautifying. So we understood the potency of our technology to be reformulated in topical leave-on products, products that you apply with your hand on your skin multiple times a day, and that would shield you from exterior damage and perils, such as UV or visible light. So it is a natural progression, or I would say affiliate of this company, to venture out into translating the technology that we already have for specialized consumer groups. Now, it's not the core part of our business, but it's certainly a part that we invest about 7 to 9% of our annual budgets into it. And the additional benefit of going into specialized consumer groups is that you create more visibility for the company and for its causes. And so you translate the pharmaceutical area of photomedicine into specialized consumer groups. And we launched last month our first protective product, polychromatic protection, that will be officially launched in the 1st of March. And in total, we will have 4 product lines.
Thank you. And if we change topics to capital management, why hasn't CLINUVEL implemented a share buyback program?
Non-clinical, but I am going to refer it back to Philippe, if I may, to answer that question.
Yeah, the topic of share buyback is quite interesting. There are a good number of reasons why companies do it. we as a board discussed this at length, and there's a good rationale why we haven't done it so far. First of all, redistribution of wealth in pharmaceuticals to shareholders is one, but the remit of a company is to redeploy its resources in development, fortifying a pipeline, but also, as Sir Andrew said, looking for external opportunities. Second of all, the question of share buyback always comes up in a downturn. I've never heard that question when the stock was at $30, $40. So the instrument to be used to prop up the share price on a short-term basis is not congruent to our view of managing the company. Now, there's a paradox, of course, because I am one of the largest private individual shareholders. It would be in my benefit, my interest to do it, but it's not in the interest of the company and all of you shareholders to deploy our capital and to repurchase the shares. Now, the third reason, which I'm particularly sensitive to, and is that we are directly speaking to insurance companies. And you better heed and listen to what these insurance companies are telling you. And that is, you can maintain drug prices, but when drug companies start repurchasing their shares and deploying capital, the perception at the other side of the table is that there is too much cash around. And from that moment on, the price of your drugs will be under pressure. So the perception, the optics are extremely bad for pharmaceutical companies. And it is not to say that we will never address it, but we've never had the reason to so far.
Thank you. And again, on capital management question here, what's the company's approach to capital management, please?
That, I think, is a question for our chair. Willem, could you take that question, please?
If you're starting a company in the beginning and you have big plans and you need to finance this, I think I remember the times that Mr. Philip was going around and meeting a lot of people all around the world to gather money for his plans. And he succeeded in a very special way, in my opinion. So now that the company is making profits, I think we should like to stay on the safe side. And we have plans, we have further plans which needs money. We want to expand, we want eventually, and we are looking around for opportunities in the market to buy other companies. So if you have these plans, it's always good in these particular circumstances to have some cash on hand. And that's why we have this policy.
Thank you. Another sort of miscellaneous questions. What sort of problems are you currently facing in any of the business areas, please?
Thank you, David. Well, a real operational question. Back to you, Philippe.
I'm really not in the business of telling you all the problems we have. There are ample of that. I think we are in the business, and I pride myself to have a team around us that actually looks for solutions. A major challenge that our industry is facing, and I believe we will not be immune to it, is talent. I'm a great believer that technology is subservient to the people that work on it. It's really not about technology. And finding talent in the world post-pandemic is proving a challenge. Retaining talent is key, but people come with different demands. The fact that we use office space worldwide 40% is a new equilibrium that I need to get used to, and that we as a board get used to. And we pose ourselves the question, how long will that continue? Is that the new norm? So a challenge is to attract the right talent to a company, not only to ask them to be passionate about what we do, but also to stay for a decade and longer. And it's for us to find the solutions and work at that. So that's my main concern at the moment.
Thank you. And a final question from online. What does CLINUVEL look like longer term? Can you give us an update as to what you think the company looks like in 5 years, please?
Philippe, for you, that one.
In 5 years. Well, let's reciprocate the question to our lead analyst. From where you sit, what is your prediction? Because forecast is very much part of your armamentarium. What would this company look like in 5 years?
So I believe it'll still be an ongoing concern. It's the first thing to say.
That's comforting to know, you know?
Which is important. I think it'll be deeply in the treatment of EPP and hopefully for the patient population, vitiligo as well. So it will be continuing to address those markets hopefully on a global basis. That's what our published research is suggesting.
Well, thank you. We've had a number of interesting and diverse questions given to us. I would like to thank David for your time today and for facilitating the discussions. I'm now going to open questions to the floor, but I have 1 minute that I just need to wait, I believe. Apologies.
All right, so yeah, that's a difficult one. Along a journey of 2 decades, now I should start differently. We respect very much those that write and publish, analysts, journalists, those that take the time to dissect and analyze a company, like our analyst. In general, we have never paid analysts for public research. I very much believe in the independence, the good and the bad. And the prominent analysts in Australia are also a duo that started 21 years ago in BioShares. And we all collectively have benefited from their independent research. I want to share with you an anecdote of 2005, where a lead analyst in Australia, Mr. David Blake, was waiting for me after the first board meeting, Collins Street number 1. And once the board meeting was complete, he asked me what I was doing in Australia and whether I'd enjoyed my first board meeting. It was quite an inquisitive dialogue that we had, and there was a lot of humor and sarcasm in the way he approached me, but there was a great intellect behind the questions. It was quite apparent after the first dialogue, and he asked me whether I had a single or a return ticket to Europe. I said, well, I think it's a return ticket. And he said, very good on you, because this company is going nowhere. That was a difficult start. If your lead analyst in the room already tells you that you have no place as a company. David followed the company with Mark Pachaz, who both have the weekly updates on our sector in Australia and New Zealand, and they converted from skeptic to supporters, believers in the technology. The second encounter I had with David was in 2009, actually after an AGM where we hosted drinks, and where David asked me, are you going to continue with this program in EPP, yes or no? And we are not alien to self-doubt. That's what we don't know yet. The results look promising, but it's early to say whether there is a commercial reality for it. And David said, what about quality of life? Have you looked at quality of life? I said, sure, but we look also at primary efficacy. Does the drug work? I said, but what about quality of life? Do we emphasize quality of life enough? Because that's very important. David was right, because we added quality of life to our tool of measuring the efficacy of drug. It became a main focal point in the discussions with EMA and FDA. And over the course, a friendship emerged. And, in the Nordic countries, I call it a unusual person, a great mensch that supported the company, but yet remaining independent. And today we have the wife of late David Blake present here today. And as a tribute to your husband, I can't comfort you nor ourselves, but the only thing I can say is that we talk about your husband in the present tense. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Philippe. I'm now going to open questions from the floor. Again, may I just ask to please raise your hand with your yellow card and we will pass the microphone to you. And please identify yourself. I think from my vantage point here, I can see more clearly. So I hope I don't miss anybody. And I can see a gentleman there. Thank you.
Thank you. John Cunning is my name. You touched a little bit on the non-pharmaceutical products, let's say cosmeceutical, and you said that there'd been some launch. Where has that been launched, and what is the program or expectation going forward for products being launched, and in what countries?
Thank you. Well, I think that's for you, Philippe, please.
Okay, it's good. It's refreshing to talk about. The area is very competitive. I'm not saying anything new there. And we've identified these three audiences that would benefit from the range of products. And by that, we are seeing a fragmented population around the world. So what we did 2 years ago, we established a communication branding marketing team with the purpose of aggregating these audiences online, very much the way we've done it in 2006 with the EPP program through Facebook, and readdressing social media in a different manner. And we have a team sitting in the UK doing nothing else all day to aggregate, to establish these audiences first. So our first target through the 6 campaigns is to establish the audiences, the readership, the registered potential users in the future before you introduce these products. If you reverse that order, you could have successful products actually without having the audience. And so we have a very staged a number of campaigns where we have divided these groups in three. Each group has 20 representatives. We call them CUVAs, CUV ambassadors, who on a fee per activity basis are talking about their ordeal, the company's mission and values, but never about the company's products. So that is a new definition of influencing other groups online. Once these campaigns are completed, sequentially these 4 product lines are being introduced. The second part of the campaign, being sensitive to the use of social media in the right sense, is to have a program of 10 QVIPs, intriguing personalities, people with a high profile in life, artists, musicians, actors, with more than 1 million users, that's our threshold, and they disseminate the mission, the value, the risk profile worldwide to create these audiences. So establish your audiences first before you introduce the products.
May I have your name,
Yeah,
sir?
Sure. My name's Barry Telford. Just a follow-up on that question about the cosmetics. When you do launch, how are you going to actually sell it? Is it going to be just... I know you've had a lot of success with Scenesse in the United States, where you've been working with people and insurers and really had total control. Are you going to try and do that with your cosmetics and only do it online? Or because I've got a bit of an issue, if you're doing it online, how are you going to know who ends up using the product anyway? So I'm just would really like to know how you're going to do it, please.
It's a good question. So we have a model with various channels. There's an online distribution channel that we are going to use and set up. We have also specific channels through doctors' offices where these patients, these call out specialized consumers, are having access to the products. By and large, you can say you will not find these products on the average Boots or a supermarket, because you do not want to compete for shelf space. That is dear. So we have identified specific channels that we will manage, and then the products are shipped directly through your home. And so online is part of our distribution strategy.
Thank you. I have a card again. I'm going to take I saw this one first, if I may. Your name again, sir, please.
Yeah, John Cumming. Sorry, it's a second question. All pharmaceuticals have side effects and drawbacks, I guess, in their use. What's the situation with melanocortins and their side effects?
That's a very original question. Side effects can be a very fatal error that a company can make by not putting sufficient attention to it. That comes under the umbrella of safety or pharmacovigilance. I mentioned before, there are 3 words in this company, really, if you want to simplify it, what we do: longitude, purpose, and value. Longitude means that you need to know the side effects of novel products for more than a decade. The traditional approach of this industry is that you distribute your product with your insert, your list of side effects or potential side effects, and then various other parties are managing that, and you collect the data and make up a balance over 1, 2, or 3 decades, whether these side effects are light enough to continue distribution. We have changed that system by saying, well, we do not want to rely on these third parties. We form our own pharmacovigilance team that longitudinally follow up every user of our product. So you collect the data in the database and monthly evaluate them. There's a whole safety committee that presides over these side effects, as you say it, worldwide. It's a dear exercise, it's a very elaborate exercise, but it means that within 24 hours, you know when someone actually has a side effect owing to your drug, and can also distinguish whether they have side effects not owing to your drug, like a flu or a sprained ankle. So everything is reported. And that means that you can intervene, can correct, can talk directly to the patients and physicians. And that has been one of our gravest concerns at the start of this company in 2005 to 2010, is would the side effects actually warrant and justify us continuing the translation of these drugs, these melanocortins. Now today, 17 years later, I'm pretty confident that after 12,000 doses administered, that the side effect profile is quite consistent. And with that, we are confident to use the melanocortins in other domains. But that is very much owing to the systems that we set up. So I don't know if that answers the specific question, but we are reasonably confident, as much as you can, after 2 decades, that it can be safely used in the right doses, in the right frequency.
Thank you, Philippe. We have a question from a gentleman on the left who's raised his hand. May I have your name, sir?
Mark Badcock.
Thank you.
Just back to the topicals, Philippe. You've spoken in previous AGMs, and Mr. Blydorp in his interview series talked about a topical tanning product. I'm just not sure why we need a complicated marketing strategy. If it's a topical tanning product, it'll sell itself. Let's get it out.
Mr. Badcock refers to the use of melanocortins as a skin product, a leave-on product that causes or stabilizes tanning. I go back to your question about safety, sir. Introducing new topicals that causes or stabilizes tanning, in our view, is not a safety concern. In the regulatory view, it is a safety concern because it's novel. So how does an average person distinguish from a freckle, a sunspot, or melanoma? Because they all are tanning. They all have a color. And we are very conscious of that regulatory and medical concern, although the technology has no causal relationship to any of these phenomena. So back to Mr. Badcock's question, is that when the time is right, when the first 2 products have been released, and when the regulatory concerns have been allayed, and when we have generated the results in xeroderma pigmentosum with the same group of drugs in high-risk populations that are prone to develop skin cancers, that is the right moment to launch a new product that stabilizes tanning. And that means that our clinical program feeds and is related to our dermato-cosmetic program. And that's why you can never separate these companies. You cannot spin off, divest the dermato-cosmetic venture and decoupling it from our clinical activities. Our clinical justification and data are actually helping the dermatocosmetic use of melanocortins. I hope that that strategy is sufficiently understood.
Thank you, Philippe. At this moment, I don't see any further yellow cards. Sorry, sir, we have one here. May we have your name, please?
I'm Alan Cox. I'm a member of Team Invest.
Welcome.
I'm seeing 4 uses for afamelanotide. And I'm seeing, or assuming, different doses required for each of those 4 uses. Probably also needing different pricings. So how do you manage the pricing structures for the different uses and different doses without undermining the accepted pricing structures that you've got with governments for EPP?
You're playing chess at home. What the gentleman is asking, if you have different dosage forms of a drug, say it like Mr. Badcock says, in a topical formulation, in an implant or an injectable, how do you manage the pricing of these 3 different products with similar ingredients? Is that correct? Yes. Well, the answer is with great care. First of all, pricing in pharmaceuticals is a function of what the payer, the reimbursement agency, is willing to pay for it. But it's also a function of the efficacy, the relief you're providing as a company in certain diseases. You can imagine that for certain cancer drugs, where there is a curative rate, you can command a higher price than for a drug that is palliative. That is the reality of life. So once you understand the concept of quantifying the relief, it's called health technology assessment, you come to a formula where the benefit that you provide needs to be quantified. And so you heard Professor Rosenfeld talk about the use of melanocortins in stroke. And stroke is arguably a life-threatening condition where you'd have to intervene fast. So we starting from the other end is, what are the comparable treatments in stroke? What price points are there? Can we produce at scale at that price point? What are the insurers willing to pay? What is reasonable for society? You have to stay within reason in pricing your drugs. And how does it relate to the other melanocortins? So there's a whole myriad of factors that eventually lead to a pricing analysis that is fair for the end users, the patients and the physicians, fair for the payors, the insurers, and fair for the company and you as shareholders. I would be lying to say that it's a simple task, but that is what we do. And so there will be different price points for these melanocortins in various diseases. And if, to go with your argument, if there are 3 different products, these 3 different products will most likely have 3 different prices. Does that answer your question, sir? There is no reason for concern at this stage.
Thank you. I have a further question, gentleman there on the left. Your name, sir?
Andrew Dixon.
Thank you.
So my understanding that the 4 topicals, 3 following the first release, will contain some active melanocortin ingredient. How much is that product development complete? And secondly, how much testing has occurred amongst the human population, if you like?
Well, I start with the last question. Product development never completes. It's an ongoing process. You optimize your formulations at the right concentration, at the right dose. And each product will have 3 iterations of them, a light, a medium, and a high concentration. The effect which you wish to see determines the label that you can claim. And so the 3rd and 4th product are on their way in research and development. And the big decision will be, for any company, but certainly for us, is at what scale do you produce, which manufacturer to use, what's your intellectual property position, and how can you defend it in years to come. That's of equal concern compared to the research and development. So again, you need to champion, it's a decathlon, you need to master all the disciplines. I'm a great advocate to bring manufacturing in-house of all formulations because you remain in control. And that's a debate that we have as a board of how far we go in self-manufacturing.
I believe one more question, and we are rather short on time now. So if I may, unless there is anything else pressing, make this the last question. Thank you.
Just a very short question. Perhaps to Philippe again. At past AGMs and communication to the market, you've detailed access to Japan and also VP as an indication. They seem to have been lost. Can you enlighten us whether you still intend to obtain access in Japan and pursue the VP indication?
Yeah, these are very relevant questions. In Japan, we are pursuing, we are interested, we are doing our homework. Japan generally requires you to do one more trial on Japanese patients, notwithstanding the fact that we have seen this product commercialized successfully in Europe, US, and the Middle East. Second question, variegate porphyria is a very small market. We have one trial designed and approved, and it's now for the 2 centers to free up the capacity to treat these patients. And if you fast forward, that would then result into a label extension. But we're far from that point. We need to conduct a trial and get the regulatory approval for it. In general, I would add that we place more emphasis on EPP than variegate porphyria, simply due to the severity of the disease.
Philippe, I am not going to be able to take more questions, but however, after this meeting, with refreshments, please feel free to speak to any members of the board. Since there are no more questions, I would like to hand back to you, Willem, as chair, please.
Officer Peter Renda to advise the meeting of the poll results.
So the poll results, he's given the company the poll results, and they appear behind you on screen.
Okay, I think that is clear. Then all the resolutions are accepted, and this results will be verified and released to the Australian Security Exchange after the meeting and no later than opening of market tomorrow. I think all items have now been addressed, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance, and I hope for a successful 2023 and beyond for all of us. I now invite the room to join us for refreshments outside. Thank you very much.